Okay, so why don't we have a full session today, and I want us to make valuable use of the time. So hello everyone, I'm Betty Ann, and you've been joining us on this kind of discussion we've been having around rural proofing. Just a few housekeeping rules for us to think about. One, always we want you to use the chat. Please introduce yourselves. Tell us why this, what you want to learn about stakeholder engagement, what you're doing, where are you in your rural proofing process, why are you with us today? As always, with our speakers, if you have a question for them, please put their name in the question and we will direct them to check the chat to respond to any questions. And of course, feel free to jump in, suggest questions, ask, share your thoughts on the presentations, and have a conversation. That's why we do these. We learn a lot from the discussion in the chat as well. Um, Feel free to turn on your camera. This is a discussion. Don't be shy. Think of this more as a town hall, and these are informal chats that we get to know each other and see who's concerned or thinking about rural proofing, because that's helpful for us as well. So with that in mind, we have an ambition for this discussion. We started with intelligence. We started with thinking about the evidence that you need um, to support rule proofing. That has been recorded. I won't rehash it here, but we covered that in great detail the last time. Today, we are going to focus on stakeholders. I'm going to be a bit provocative and say that um, using the right stakeholders at the right time. I have not actually gone over all the presentations, so I'll be interested to see if it matches with my introduction. But I think for the success of rural proofing, we need to be a bit more strategic in how we use stakeholders. And so I want to open with a brief kind of presentation and overview of it, and then open it up to a really interesting panel who will give you, I think, four different perspectives on stakeholders within the rural proofing process. So with that in mind, maybe we can open up with my presentation. So, as I said, we're here to think about the stakeholders and how you use them in the rural proofing process. Just to think about this, we thought a lot about this when we drafted the paper on rural proofing that came out, I think maybe a year ago. And a big question that we asked at the time, and we were talking to colleagues who were tasked with rural proofing, was, what worked and what didn't. And some of the kind of observations that I will share with you in this opening presentation came out of that. So the first slide is to put it in context. And I think it's worth thinking about when rural proofing comes up or the different scenarios. And of course, there are thousands of scenarios. This captures in broad strokes. You can click through, just staying on the slide, the different scenarios where you're rural proofing, ongoing policy, new initiatives, and initiatives that come out of shocks. So they're like three big tranches of when you're maybe thinking about rural proofing in a very, I'm sure in every country that's represented on this discussion today and in the participant group, complicated government environments. But at the most, these are the different scenarios that you are dealing with. And it's important to keep that in mind because I want you to think about how we bring the stakeholders in with this in mind. Next slide, please. And then we want to think about how stakeholders, what they're affected by, right? And policy speed, no matter how much we would like to not think about it, time constraints and governance level affect how you use stakeholders. You can click on the next item to complete the slide. Yeah. So you'll see that at the national level, you could conceivably have less time. Things are moving faster. So what are the types of stakeholders that are being activated? Maybe the ones that are already activated, maybe the ones who already have knowledge, maybe the ones that are at your fingertips who can turn things around quickly. And if you click on the next bullet, at the subnational level, whether you're at the regional or the very local level, you could potentially have more time. This is relative to your context. So again, very big picture here, but the point is time matters and the context within which where you are executing your rural proofing could affect your stakeholder use as well. And so I wanted to kind of set that up to say we need to be thinking about these pieces as we're thinking about breaking down stakeholder use, because we have a tendency to say rural voices need to be at the table, which is true. But what does that look like? Who are these stakeholders and how are we using them? Next slide, please. So here we recall the process, which I talked about a bit in the previous presentation that I did for intelligence, but now I've shaped it differently. Whereas at the beginning and the end, you have the policy proposal and you have the decision making, but it's in the in between that things are moving. And this is again, your time constraint is your window of action. So if you accept that rule proofing has to happen within a certain time frame, that means there are a certain number of activities that need to take place within that time frame to make it valuable so that it has the impact that you're looking for. So what I tried to show on this slide is the policy proposal, whatever it is, coming out of the different contexts are on the table. Then it's rule proofing. So you need to do what? You need to gather that proof, right? You need to package the proof in a way that's user friendly. The items that are more in the dash lines are, you're showing both your unintended consequences. So what could happen if the policy proposal isn't adjusted? And hopefully, if you were in with us on our previous talk, the value added of what rural brings to the table, why you should collaborate with rural to find alternatives could be an option for you here as well. And then you're doing this in a way that is clear, concise, user-friendly, and actionable. Quite a bit in a window of action. So how do we use stakeholders in this space? Next slide, please. The role of stakeholders, if you click through, they're contributors and producers of the different types of intelligence. That's how we should think about them. They have different forms. We need to make strategic use of them, so we should put them in buckets. Almost, do you know what your stakeholders can do? What are their strengths? You can go ahead and click through. So what I tried to do here is give you three tranches, three ways of thinking about or categorizing your stakeholders. You have your generators, you have your translators, and you have your validators, right? The stakeholders that will help you generate the evidence, we'll unpack that in a minute. The stakeholders that will help you translate the evidence, gather that into the language of the non-rural actor so that he or she will understand. And then we have the validators, the stakeholders that will help you to validate and co-design the form that you put the evidence in so it can be transmitted to the policymaker, decision maker, whomever it is that you're moving it through. So there are these buckets. Now, who is in this bucket? Let's talk about that. Now, what I'm going to give you is a broad stroke. You take that as it will, and maybe your key takeaway is, do you know your generators, your translators, or your validators, right? But let's think a little bit together about who's in what bucket. Next slide, please. A good example maybe of a generator. This is something we've been thinking about. I call it the red phone. There's always a phone, meaning someone you can call quickly, right? So you're in a role where there's a rapid turnaround. You need an immediate response on rural. Here you may need your seasoned academics, your with really who already have polished relationships with government, Rural Development Agency analysts could be answers, agricultural departments or people you could call, experts who are accessible, national rural networks who are echo chambers already, who are already hearing and are in the know. Why? Because they're already briefed, they have deep rural knowledge, they are available to respond quickly. They speak the language. This matters. And again, of non-rural agencies, because who are you rural proofing for? Who is this for? It's not for departments of agriculture, it's not for rural departments, it's for ministries of education, labor, environment. So when you're in a scenario where you need rapid, quick turnarounds, could be at the national level, but this could also be at some national level. Here are examples of stakeholder groupings that we need to be thinking about. Then next slide, please. We have other generators. We have your technical and your quantitative folks who can organize existing data. We talked a lot about rural proofing relies on evidence, but where is the data? It's always spread across, it's in different places. It already exists. We need folks to organize, to find it, to bring it together, and then identify where you have data gaps, right? So your universities, statisticians within different agencies, external experts, and you, again, I'm giving you examples. You, I'm sure, can fill in other examples with more examples of your own. But this is to give you a sense of here is a bucket of other generators and why people who have access to data, analytical skills, who can cross data sets, get that knowledge, pull it together, and really provide you with an overview. Remember, we talked about different types of information that you need. State of rural data. State of rural is we need our technical and our quantitative stakeholders to help here, experts, as you wish. Next slide. Now let's go to other generators. The generators to help us with the narrative and the storytelling, because we also need in our bucket of evidence and information, stories, what rural can do, how to reframe rural as a partner. We talked a bit about this in the previous workshop. NGOs, leader groups, community-led groups, intermediaries, local networks, they have the knowledge, they're trusted, they have access, they already have a lot of this information. They know what's going on the ground. They can already make the policy connections. They can be thinking ahead. We know that departments of environment are concerned about climate agenda. What are those stories what does rural bring to the table? Here again, you have a bucket of knowledge across your leader groups, everyone bringing that information together to tell that narrative. You're using existing information and you can identify a different group of generators. Next slide, please. Then we have another generator that I didn't talk about in the last presentation, but it's relevant here and I've unpacked it for a reason. The community voice and the lived experience. That's a bit different. What are rural people looking for from their rural places? What is driving their well-being? What is their lived experience? This is where you bring and ensuring that the bottom-up perspectives are also reflected in the evidence. And who brings that in? Could be the same group as before, could be trusted intermediaries, again, local leaders, local institutions. They have access, they can bring communities together for rural talks, local consultations, really understand what people are looking for from their community, from their healthcare systems, from their education systems locally, from their transportation systems, and make sure that's built in. What do rural people want? Is that reflected also in your evidence chamber? And who should be bringing that all together? So these are your generators, right? And again, I'm sure I'm giving you a few examples, but I'm sure you can think about more. And definitely, if you do think about more, put that in the chat. Next slide, please. Now that you have compiled this information, Now you need to think about what that looks like. What is the support, rural proof and supporting materials? What is the compilation of this material look like? And here again, go to the next slide. This is where you need your policy savvy stakeholders. This is an important group because they're going to take what has been compiled previously and translate it, align it, package it. They're going to be, these are, again, experts who understand policy language, who have worked with governments, who know how to package it. Could be academic institutions who have relationships with government, could be consultancies. This could look different in your context, but what's relevant is that they're fluent in government language, specifically language of other agencies that don't think rural. They can take complex information and make it user friendly. An example is sometimes you'll have folks that cannot read data, but you're giving them data. So we need to think about that and how do you make sure that the information works and is in a format that is readily understood by the folks that you want to use it. So how do you frame that information, translate it, and communicate it? And your policy savvy experts can help with that. Next slide, please. But now, okay, you have supporting materials. Is it clear? Is it concise? Is it tailored to the rule proofer? You've heard me say this many times. How do you know? Next slide. Your last group are your validators. And this is where you bring in your rule proofers. We want your rule proofers. They're more than just end users, and we have to think about them as more than just end users. They need to test that the supporting materials are the things they could use, are in a form that they could use, because they are the ones that are going to have to use the information that has been compiled. Bring them into the conversation early. Help them make sure they can provide feedback, co-design the formats. That's why we like to say you may not get rural proofing right the first time. It is a feedback loop where you go back and forth. These could be civil servants from non-rural ministries. Very important, because a civil servant in a rural ministry is not as helpful as if you can get one who's from education, because that's who the product is for. We want them to be, they could also be former civil servants, maybe some folks who have retired in the last 2 to 3 years who are still in the know about how government works. But thinking about policy practitioners here, and there could be other examples. And the why is because they're the end users, because they understand the constraints of their work time, because they're going to have to rule proof within the framework of what they already have to do in their day-to-day jobs, and they can drive uptake, and more importantly, they can promote buy-in of the rule proofing process if you bring them in early. And my final slide is just a quick reminder of what I've said. You can click through it. And it really is just about knowing that stakeholders are contributors and co-producers. How you use them will vary. If you take it as a guide, think about them in buckets of generators, translators, and validators, and thinking about rule proofers and as more than end users and bringing them into the process early. I wanted you to start with that thinking and then now invite our different presenters to come in. What I love about the presenters today is that they're each presenting from different stages in rural proofing, from early days to more seasoned practitioners or seasoned experience with Finland and Northern Ireland. And then, of course, here there's a difference between a more formal practice and a more informal practice. So um, with that in mind, Victor, who is our first speaker? I apologize, I don't have my agenda in front of me.
It will be Spain. Diana, as in from Spain.
So Diana, I'm going to give the floor to you, and as they bring up your slides, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Good evening to everyone. The first thing I would like to do is to thank the OECD and all the people who are currently in the meeting for organizing this meeting and also inviting Castilla-La Mancha. I would do my best. Some of us have previously met, so you already know that I'm not an expert in this matter. I'm just trying to help my colleagues. So if you have any question, I will try to answer as better as possible later. So today I'm presenting the results of the participatory midterm evaluation of our regional strategy against the population in our region, which is Castilla-La Mancha, for the period 2021 to 2031. This strategy represents the key planning instrument for implementing our law, which was the law to 2021 on economic, social, and tax measures against the population. This evaluation has been conducted all over 2025 and represents a milestone in how we assess public policy by involving the territory directly in the analysis of its own development. As many of you already know, the strategy against the population is a cross-cutting, multi-sectorial public policy addressing challenges related to public services, taxation, employment and entrepreneurship, mobility and digital connectivity, housing, and also territorial development. So next slide, please. Thank you. Our framework is defined, as I say, by the law to 2021, which was pioneer piece of legislation on this matter in Spain. This law allows us to shift from reactive measures to a proactive governance model. We focus our efforts on 26 rural areas, specifically classifies into 3 categories of vulnerability: the extreme, the intense, and at-risk zones. The areas of extreme depopulation are those that gather municipalities with a population density of less than 8 inhabitants per square kilometers. The areas of intense depopulation are those with a density of more than 8 inhabitants per square kilometers. And finally, the areas at risk zones are those groups of municipalities that have a population density of less than 20 inhabitants per square kilometers. So all of them are really small. The goal is simple but ambitious, and it's to ensure territorial cohesion and equal opportunities regardless of where citizens live. The main purpose of this evaluation has been to generate institutional learning, support continuous improvement, and strengthen accountability. Through structured participation contributions, we collect from key actors in all these 26 rural areas that we previously detected in our law. The evaluation focused on assessing progress and results achieved so far, analyzing the real impact on territorial cohesion, identifying necessary adjustments and improvements, and also ensuring that measures remain relevant and adapt to local reality. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. Since its approval in December 2021, the strategy against the population has been fully implemented from 2022 onward until nowadays. The 2025 midterm evaluation examines progress during this period between 2022 to 2024, which has been the first phase of implementation. Let's look at the numbers from the first 3 years. So we have achieved a 52.1% confidence rate of our objectives. Even more significant is institutional engagement. You can see we have a 95.7% of all planned actions already been initiated or developed in all our departments. And for us, this shows that the strategy is not just a plan or a mere paper, but a transversal engine moving all across the departments within the regional government of Castilla-La Mancha. The most encouraging data for us is the demographic shift. In areas of extreme depopulation, we have seen a 1.7% of population increase, and you will wonder how. This has been through a positive migration balance of all over 4,672 individuals. We call it the migration driver effect, which is successfully offsetting the natural population decline, proving that our rural areas are once again becoming an attractive place to live and work within our region. Next slide, please. Thank you. Why did we choose a participatory approach for this midterm review? Well, because we thought we have complex problems like the population that couldn't be understood with just statistics. We need methodological triangulation and evaluation. By combining quantitative indicators with the qualitative know-how of local actors, we ground our findings in real-world operational knowledge. This increases the legitimacy and the real-world impact of our decisions. And the evaluation was led by an internal evaluation team that was composed by the staff from the Junta of Castilla-La Mancha, obviously. The unit responsible was the Commissioner for the Demographic Challenge, and this group has incorporated a transversal team from different departments within the government that were responsible for the implementation of the policies and measures. Next slide, please. Thank you. During 2025, we tend to mobilize the territory. We use specialized questionnaires tailored to the specific expertise and region of each participant. Furthermore, we involve the Interdepartmental Commission Against the Population, which is an internal body with competence in demographic challenge that was created because of this strategy. We involved this department to ensure that the evaluation wasn't isolated in one office, but was shared all across the policy's perspective, from health to education to digital connectivity and also housing. Participation was integrated following the same model originally used to design the strategy that we used in 2021. Contributions were gathered after reviewing implementation data and indicators and before drafting the revised version of the strategy. The process includes work tables with territory actors such as the GAMDER, the university, local authorities, regional commissions, etc. The online contributions via the regional participation portal, and a structured questionnaire aligned with the strategy's thematic axis, and also a final presentation to the Regional Council of Rural Development of the Population, which took place last December. The process responds to a structured participation model where we receive contributions, assessment, and proposals. As an example, we can highlight the contribution of Precander, for example, on education as well as digitalization. And we received more than 30 economic and social participation from different actors of the rural area. The profile has included local administration, as the previous said, entities, economic and social agents, and people that just were interested, on this process or the real areas. Next slide, please. Thank you. The final evaluation report was enriched by 50 technical inputs from regional institutions and professional bodies. 30 of them came from organization, and the other 20 from citizens that submit their contribution and propose. This inclusive process has fostered a sense of ownership in our consideration, of course, among stakeholders. Because we think when local institutions see their expertise reflected in the report, the strategy becomes more credible and sustainable over a long term. Even if it was not the formal design process, the participation significantly influenced strategic adjustments. And with that, we made more than 50 changes that were introduced in our strategy. For example, we were reorienting educational digitalization actions after several proposals by AFAME and OHL-CLM, who were local stakeholders. We introduced new territorial development actions following contribution from another local authorities, Ricambra and Fallemur, and we add new actions in social services and economic support, such as early care in local environment or aid for flight rate contributions. And we also had 13 new measures include to fight against populations, such as the lack of available housing, which is a huge problem in Spain. For what we will design a specific program, a flat rate for the safe, employed, and provision of financing for small cooperatives or work-owned companies that provide services in rural areas, the implementation of transport passes, or the promotion of energy communities. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, what have we learned from this strait for the future, the period between 2025 to 2031? Well, first of all, we have learned that cross-cutting coordination is not negotiable. Secondly, we have learned that we must improve our feedback mechanisms because we think it's vital that participants see exactly how their inputs translate into concrete policy changes. So we are moving toward a model of adaptive capacity where the strategy evolves based on constant community feedback. For the future strategy adaptation for the next period, this strategy will focus on building adaptive capacity and aligning development programs with community needs. This evaluation highlights several lessons for future cycles. First of all, that stable long-term frameworks are essential for addressing structural challenges like the population. Secondly, that participation must be systematic and visible, ensuring contributions translate into concrete decisions. Thirdly, that cross-sector coordination is indispensable to address complex territorial issues. Fourthly, that methodological triangulations, which for us combines indicators and participatory information, enhance evaluation quality and practical impact. And finally, that evaluation must be integrated into the policy cycle, not treated as a one-off exercise. If I may I have one more minute to talk about the difficulties and the strengths? Do I?
Yes, you have time.
Okay, thank you.
You have 2-3 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. So, which are the main difficulties that we have perceived during this process? The territorial heterogeneity that we have, because you have to think that we have 26 rural areas that differ greatly in demographic and socioeconomic problems and conditions. Also, the structural nature of the population, because we think impacts are long-term and not always visible during this early stage of the implementation of our evaluation. Also, that cross-sector complexity make difficult that the coordination across multiple departments require sustained effort along the period of the evaluation and also the implementation of the strategy. And finally, that uneven participation capacity across territories, because depending on local resources and organizational networks, and depending on different places of the region. But we also have some strengths about this experience. The first one is we do think we have a solid legal and strategic framework that ensures continuity and stability with our law and our strategy. We do think that we have comprehensive approach addressing all factors of the demographic challenge. We made that at the beginning of the strategy, that clear territorial segmentation that allows us to target the interventions. We have an institutionalized system of periodic evaluations. And finally, we have work and structured participation, which enriches the analysis with local insights and strengthens legitimacy. So to conclude, integration evaluation as a structural part of the policy cycle has a strength for our accountability and our institutional learning. We think the combination of hard data, and social participation is our best tool to face the demographic challenge. And within these findings, the findings reinforce the value of participatory and evidence-based evaluation as a driver of continuous improvement for us. So in conclusion, this midterm evaluation has been a key step for us by ensuring that the strategy against the population remains effective, relevant, and also aligned with the real needs of Castilla-La Mancha in our rural areas. So I already finished. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Diana. And your fingers are going to be busy because I saw questions going up for you as you were presenting. So I suspect you'll be busy typing for a few minutes. But that was really a really nice jumping off point for what I hope will be a good conversation that we'll have later. So we'll turn now to Estonia, Eri, and ask you to present where you are and what you're thinking around stakeholder engagement vis-a-vis rural proofing. The floor is yours.
Hello, my name is Aare. Thank you, Betty, and also Diana. Last year, I had the privilege to be in Castilla-La Mancha in the preparatory expert group, and you have very good results on regional, on national, and also in EU level. So, and this political commitment in Spain is quite amazing for me. Just some ideas from Estonian side, and I made some compressed slides today. And please next. General structure, and also some slides will be for reading in the appendices. And I'm starting from rural proofing ecosystem in Estonia. Please next. And it is quite long, but Estonia was, one of our key questions in EU level was how to make the regional and rural proofing assessment with local stakeholder engagement a routine part of decision-making process in all ministries. And I would like to emphasize here in this civic engagement context that the main core question is not in perfect assessment of draft laws, etc., but how to slow the decline of ministries' institutional credibility and to support the legitimacy and in national and regional level and also in EU level. Because behind this, our activities in rural proofing and civic engagement is invisible trust. And it is the main reason why we need a very good toolbox. And today I will touch some points in our model and system. Please next. Please next. In brief Estonian context also, maybe Estonia is a relatively small country, and we have neighbors in EU, Finland and Latvia, and Russia in eastern side. And maybe Estonian model building would be provide additional value and three reasons. First, that we are newcomers in this rural proofing field, and we are using and adopting the good examples and from other countries like Finland or Spain or Ireland. And one of the critical questions is also, of course, how to link the spatial data analysis with rural stakeholders engagement. The second reason maybe is that Estonia has been quite good in general ex-ante regulatory impact assessment in primary lawmaking. And now, according to OECD rankings, we are the best in EU. But the problem is how to integrate the regional and rural proofing issues into this former regulatory impact assessment model. And the third question is, of course, existential as a border country and small country. And the question is how to offset our constraints, our smallness in smart planning, data-driven area, artificial intelligence, etc. This machinery has to be built very smartly because we have same functions like bigger countries in EU, and we are trying to serve our people. Please, next slide. Just before the main part, let's dream and imagine. And I would say that if every policy and law is designed using a human-centric and base-based approach, then stakeholders from rural communities in this gray area of Estonian map would be involved and heard from the early stages of policy design, starting from identifying the right problem. And as my colleagues, designers are saying that finding the right problem and finding the right solution is not for officials or politicians, but for the people, businesses, local authorities, for the primary clients or users of political decisions. And of course, the reality is different and is a bit idealistic. Please, next one. Next slide. So now one of the why questions I'm using in my trainings in Estonia also, that we have the National Strategy Estonia 2035, and there is also the statement that public services are high quality and accessible regardless the place of residence and contribute to the well-being and safety of people. And if we are looking at the data, then the regional inequality is still rising, and we have the problem. And this puzzle guy is a rural proofer in the right side. And rural proofing is providing the right tools for place-based policy impact assessment and also the engagement of local stakeholders. Please, next slide. It is also a compressed slide, but maybe the puzzle guys here will say the most important. They are the most important members of rural networkers and different networks, starting from village movement, Kodukant, then leader union, local action groups, then network of regional development centers, then Estonian Association of Cities and Municipalities. There are different municipalities, rural municipalities and city municipalities. And of course, also these different business organizations who are interested in rural policy, etc. And this, how to create good coalitions in national level is the question when we are talking about competition between ministries in the national level, or also if we are talking about the competition between different policies on EU level. And our rural networks are connected to the European networks. And as we know now, the next financial programming period is starting in EU level. And this interaction on national level and also on EU level is very important to make rural problems and rural communities visible. And another question is also how we can increase the data-driven visibility of local communities and to push the rural policy-related points in political agenda. Please, next one. Also quite compressed, but this puzzle guy is saying that our regional, rural and Eastlands policies related advisory bodies are quite fragmented now, and there is a need for a better coordination and cooperation. Also on this list of ministries, and we have more than 10 different advisory bodies, but now the question is how to consolidate them and how to build up better coalitions. And because this competition between ideas, between knowledge on political level is quite high. This next one. Maybe please one back in this exception. In this small written part is Jürgen Habermas left this world some time ago, and this discourse ethics and discuss democracy issues, and Habermas argued that only those norms can claim legitimacy that could meet approval of all affected parties in rational discourse. Please, next one. very brief here. We have from the legal side, all is okay in Estonia. And if there is a problem with stakeholders engagement, it is not related to the laws or other regulations. Please, next one. Also very compressed, but I would list now the main institutional tools on the ministerial level. And the ministries between EU Commission directorates and between regional authorities and local authorities. And what we have to support stakeholder engagement in concrete issues. First, we have the Ministry's annual stakeholders informing and involvement plan. It is based on the working plan of different policy departments, etc. And this year it has more than 160 different activities and more than 100 draft acts. And it is public, and all stakeholders groups can see it and contact with contact persons in this plan. It's available via website. This annual stakeholders informing and involvement plan, because involvement is not in all cases of policy design. Also important annual day of strategic partners for communication and also for involvement of different interest groups, and also we are advertising this annual stakeholders informing and implementation plan in this Partners Day. This day it was in Teams, and it is also a starting event for public debates, involvement, etc. Then its related part is that ongoing review analysis of draft acts and quick check, quality check of impact assessment and stakeholder engagement information in the explanatory memorandum of draft acts. And in the end of the year, we will have a big award in cooperation with stakeholders groups from village movement, etc. And we are awarding the best policy department for the best draft law or draft act. The second point here is also the good practice guide for stakeholders engagement. That it is maybe important key point is that it is integrated into the impact assessment and rural proofing guidelines. And it is quite hard to distinguish sometimes the impact assessment, analytical tools, and the civic engagement, because the civic engagement and the stakeholders engagement is also the for the knowledge collection. If we don't have data, and of course we don't have data on the future. And also one quite important stone in this picture is our organizational strategy. And this Pusle guy is saying that two aims in this strategy are that we aim to be trusted partners and client-oriented policymakers in all our procedures, etc. And one part of these activities is also the sociological stakeholders survey this year, and we are asking also about the satisfaction with engagement. And there is more than 10 stages. This next one. Two different mandatory and non-mandatory guidelines we have, and all officials in all ministries have to follow them. And the mandatory guideline for impact assessment and stakeholders engagement is saying that if there is the impact to the regional development, including urban, rural, and coastal or islands areas, then you have to use the rural proofing guideline, which is non-mandatory. And this Pusle guy is saying that rural communities and other social minorities are often not visible in general statistics provided by the ministries. And we need the detailed analysis, the detailed discussions on rural communities, which are not visible usually on national level. This next one. Now in this picture also the Pusle guy is maybe saying the most important things. There is the structure of our rural proofing guideline, 8 steps, and stakeholders engagement is very important in the first and in the 6th stage. But the question is, how can we integrate quantitative spatial data and in-house analysis with qualitative people-centered and space-based local stakeholders engagement in the context of our limited resources, time, funding, competencies, and political commitment. And our partner in the village is saying that, hey, it seems to be an art of managing expectations, relationships, and knowledge than a science. And I would say that, yeah, it seems more as an art. Please, next one.
Yes, Ari, sorry, I will just also ask you to finish the last part in a few minutes, just because of the tight schedule we have. Thank you.
3 compressed slides. First, our winner of last year, so-called PETS Act, and there are 4 different categories of stakeholders, and the roundtable discussions, complementary surveys, etc. were discussed, and I would say emphasize here that the client is the cat Robin in this act. Please, next one. Then public transport. We had the special co-creation accelerator project and round tables in all counties, all 15 counties. 7 will be this year, and different methods to discuss how far the bus would be from the village, etc. Please, next one. It is the final. And the most village-related case in this my slides is the Koidula border crossing closure in Estonian-Russian border. And the main reason is the Russian Federation and Ukraine war, and all businesses planned, all investments planned, all jobs planned are finished, and what to do is the main question. And the role of local municipality in this region is most important. And also the proposal was made in the end of this process that to support this border area, rural municipality, which is also the border of European Union and border of NATO, with special funds to survive in these conditions. Maybe that's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. I noticed that you mentioned that the rural proofing guidelines are there. You know when to use them, but they're not formal, so they're, I guess, optional. And you have a few questions in the chat that were going in as you were going up. So this is a very comprehensive overview of what you're thinking about in Estonia. And now we'll shift to 2 countries that are a bit more advanced in how they have been using stakeholders, and I'm excited to have them join the conversation. We'll start first with Andrea, who, the rural proofing process in Northern Ireland is formal. It's attached to an act, and I specifically reached out to her because I was curious about how they've evolved using stakeholders. So I wanted to turn the floor over to you, Andrea.
Hello, how are you? My name's Andrea McCart, and I work in the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs in Northern Ireland, and we are the team that is custodian to the Rural Needs Act. So firstly, thanks for the opportunity and recognising the value that Northern Ireland and the Rural Needs Act could contribute to this session. I hope I'm able to do it justice. There has been some really interesting perspectives and content so far that have certainly educated me, and look forward to learning more after today. We're always open to learning more from others about what works, doesn't work, and sometimes what didn't work due to external factors. Legislating for the Rural Needs Act, I don't think is unique globally, but there's certainly not many countries that have decided to take that approach. I see Jane's online here today, but the Island Scotland Act 2018, there's certainly quite a few synergies, but some differences in it. And the whole purpose of the Act in Northern Ireland is to ensure that public authorities give due regard to the social and economic needs of people living in rural areas when carrying out certain duties, and I'll explain that as we go on. And it's also to provide a mechanism to improve the transparency and making it clear how rural needs have been considered as part of the decision-making process. So today I'm going to lay out some of the elements of the legislation that I hope you find interesting, and I'll also highlight some points in the process where we recommend or we commonly see stakeholder engagement playing an important part of that process. So next slide, please. Okay, so how did we get there in the first place? So what was so different about Northern Ireland? So in 2002, Northern Ireland Executive first committed to rural proofing, and at that stage it only applied to the Northern Ireland government departments and did not extend out beyond that. However, some public authorities did voluntarily try and complete the process. Then in 2009, DAERA, the department I worked for, although it was called a different name at that point, brought forward proposals to reinvigorate rural proofing, which led to the introduction of training and guidance at that point. But despite all them efforts, there was still inconsistency in the implementation of it and the lack of transparency. So in 2015, the decision was taken to strengthen it, and rural stakeholders played such a pivotal part at this point, where they lobbied and supported the desire to advocate for it being legislated. And as a result, proposals were drawn up for a Rural Needs Bill, which was introduced and came into operation in 2016. And it came into operate, although the Act became a thing in 2016, it was a commencement order that was part of it. So June 2017, it came into effect for all Northern Ireland departments and local councils, and then June 2018 for the other public authorities that are listed in the schedule. So at the minute, there's 37 public authorities that are subject to the Act. It's quite a short Act. There's only 7 clauses that are part of it, and then a schedule that lists the public authorities that are subject to it. I will provide a link to the legislation whenever I finish. I'll put it into the chat. Next slide, please. So firstly, we're custodian to the Act, so that brings certain roles and responsibilities to us, which I'll cover a bit more. But we're also subject to the Act like every other public authority. And again, stakeholders are involved at many stages here. So point 1 that we do, so using powers granted to us under the Act, we provide advice, guidance and information connected to rural needs to assist the public authorities in carrying out their functions under the Act. It's legislation, so we also have limitations, and it's important to note those. Legislating can only take us so far. Point 2, then we liaise and provide training to the rural needs coordinators in each of the public authorities. So another stakeholder we would have, which is one of the key stakeholders, would be in each of the public authorities that are subject to the Act. We have what's called a rural needs coordinator, who we train and support on an ongoing basis. Our team in DAERA is probably the unofficial one for DAERA, and we find that that's a helpful mechanism to engage and support the others in carrying out those statutory functions. Some of the bodies that come onto that schedule are small, but some of them are large, so it's no easy task for those coordinators, but they are a fantastic bunch who always try and do their best to champion rural needs within their organisations and to support the recommended process that DAERA has legislated for. Point 3 is we compile and publish a rural needs annual monitoring report yearly. So this is a huge report, 200 to 300 pages, where each year there's between 500 and 600 entries, and it's ever growing. It includes a summary of all of the rural needs impact assessments that have completed during the year. And quite often at this point, we will see stakeholders scrutinise some of these individual assessments and publish it online and media, on their social media pages or on web pages, etc. And we also operate a Rural Needs Network, where it's a network where we bring these stakeholders, the Rural Needs coordinators, into a room twice a year. And we try and engage and support and champion rural needs. And we will also then invite a range of our rural stakeholders to participate and provide advice and guidance on the completion of the process, or possibly disseminate research. And the last is we undertake statutory reviews. So next slide, please. Okay, so I have said that it's legislation and it only takes you so far. So some of the things that we do not do is we are government officials. We are not legally trained, so therefore don't provide legal advice. Public authorities must always seek appropriate legal advice when it comes to the Act. Point 2 is we have no approval role in the completion or sign off of rural needs impact assessment templates. However, we continually will provide advice and support and guidance to help them. And point 3 there, quite often we will hear from rural stakeholders that this is one of the perceived weaknesses in the Act, is we don't police the Act. DAERA has no enforcement powers or roles under the Act. And it's a decision that we often see discussed, as I say, about one of the potential weaknesses. At the minute, the rural needs public authorities can challenge the completion of a rural needs impact assessment via judicial review process. And currently, in the last 10 years, there has been a small number of unsuccessful ones, but there has recently been the most successful judicial review under the Rural Needs Act, which again, I can provide a link to. This is a stage that we quite often will see quite a bit of stakeholder engagement, as we will hear different views on judicial reviews regarding, is it a helpful tool? Does it strengthen the Act, or is it not helpful due to the costs associated to it? Next slide, please. So some of the duties under the Act, I'm just going to skim this one quite quickly, is Section 1.1 of the Act is a duty to have due regard to rural needs when carrying out certain activities. And these are the development, the adapting, the implementation, revising of a policy, strategy or plan, and the design and delivery of a public service. The rest of the duties involved compiling the information. So public authorities must gather information on how they do that. They must publish it, and then they must send that to DAERA. Next slide, please. So also, as I said, we are a duty holder, so there's some duties for us. So we must also have due regard in any Section 1 activities that we're carrying out. We must also compile information on how we do that. But then we have a responsibility to publish an annual report containing all of the information on every rural needs impact assessment that's been completed in Northern Ireland. We must lay that in our copy of that as a published report in the Northern Ireland Assembly. And then we review the list of public authorities every 3 years. Next slide, please. So the Act also puts a duty on our minister, and he or she must make a statement in the Northern Ireland Assembly about the contents of the Rural Needs Impact Assessment or the report. So quite often this is again where you will see information in the media regarding, members of our elected Assembly, elected representatives, departmental committees, rural stakeholders will quite often scrutinise and look at the examples, good and bad, and give us their views at that point. Next slide, please. So in Northern Ireland, we have, I have it here, always have it here. We have an official guidance which was being developed by DAERA back in 2018, and it's available on the website. Whilst it's not statutory guidance, legal advice indicates that where a public authority departs from the guidance, it must have strong rationale to do so. So quite often we will provide this guidance and share it for use. Next slide, please. So there's a couple of definitions which I think is really important to highlight here. So we have some definitions that are defined in the legislation, but we also have some which is in the guidance. So the first thing we have is a definition of rural. And the definition of rural most commonly used in Northern Ireland is the Interdepartmental Definition Group, which classifies those settlements with populations of less than 5,000 coupled with the open countryside. So there is other definitions which sometimes can be used, including drive time to normal towns, but this is the one that's most commonly used. Rural needs is actually defined in the legislation, where it's defined as the social and economic needs of people in rural areas. The next point is the term need is not defined in the legislation, but it's interpreted in the guidance as something that is essential to achieve a standard of living comparable to the population in general. And then the last point is person in rural areas is not defined, but it's interpreted as people living in rural areas, people working in rural areas, people operating businesses in rural areas, and people visiting rural areas for the purpose of tourism. Next slide, please. So in Northern Ireland, we have what's called, it's a Rural Needs Impact Assessment process, and it is a process recommended to ensure that public authorities fulfil their due regard duty. There's no statutory duty to complete a Rural Needs Impact Assessment. However, it's the process that will best support public authorities in ensuring that. One of the things here, which I know Betty Ann spoke about at the start, is undertaking a rural needs impact assessment will not hinder the policy development if it's carried out at the appropriate time. It will only hinder that process if it's left to the end. And it's really important that we highlight the importance of completing this process at the beginning of policy development, because only by starting early can you ensure that truly does rural considerations influence every decision that's made, not just the final decision. So this approach ensures that rural perspectives become an integral part of the process rather than just being an afterthought. And if we delay thinking about the potential impacts or necessary mitigations until after many of those decisions are made, we risk overlooking rural needs in those decisions that we make. Next slide, please. So it's a 6-step process. The first one is all about defining the activity, so understanding if it falls within the scope of the Act. Step 2 is all about understanding the impact of the policy, strategy or plan that you're doing. So you may need to seek the views of stakeholders at that point. Step 3 is where we really recommend that it starts to take shape. So that's about identifying the outcomes that are necessary to deliver a standard of living comparable to the population in general. So it's all about gathering evidence, information, and official guidance recommends that obtaining this through consulting with your rural stakeholders, your public sector, and the other organisations that are the data and statistics experts, looking at research papers. Recently in Northern Ireland, we've developed and launched a Rural Data Hub, which should improve the scope and accessibility of rural data to allow users to create bespoke area profiles at lower geography in order to demonstrate need as part of the process. Next slide, please. Sorry. So step 4 then is about considering the issue that you're trying to address and identifying potential solutions or mitigations. Step 5 then is incorporating that solution into your policy, strategy or plan. And importantly, if you don't implement it, that you must give rationale as to why not. And then step 6 is about completing the template. And we recommend that this template is available as part of the public consultation exercise. And quite often we will see again, this is where it generates quite a bit of interest with the rural stakeholders and commenting on how rural needs were considered or not, depending on what their views are. We also see this, I'm just going to put myself on pause a second. Hello, can you hear me again?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, quite often we see this as a living document, that it should be reviewed and updated at each stage. So, you know, if you leave it open to, if you publish it as part of your public consultation, that's where you're generating and seeking the views of others. So that's kind of the process in a nutshell, including some of the stages where we engage and where we commonly see stakeholder engagement. So look, we have this piece of legislation, which I've tried to give you an overview, very short, punchy kind of overview that's been in place for 10 years. I can't speak on behalf of rural stakeholders, but what we often hear is that the Act has given our rural stakeholders a seat at the table to challenge decisions that prior to the Act they wouldn't have had. But you know, the effective relationship that we're building with those rural stakeholders, both in the community and voluntary sector, who are so stretched but has such a strong advocate for rural needs. None of those things you'll ever find in the legislation because of their behaviour, and it's how important that impact makes. So I hope that was helpful, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'll send some of the links to the chat now for people to see.
Thank you so much, Andrea. That was very helpful, and it provides a great perspective on something that is formal and that's been around for 10 years. And I love how you presented it and the different points that rural communities have to engage and how they are able to engage. There are a few questions for you in the chat, so I encourage you to take a look there, and please ask Andrea some questions. She really went fast, but there's a lot that they've learned from rural needs that might be helpful to you in your rural proofing process. Our final speaker represents the Finnish perspective, which I'm excited to have, and you can maybe bring up her PowerPoint. but I really wanted to have Finland in. I debated heavily on whether it was in this session or the final session, but then this session won because I do think that because of their long length of time with rural proofing, they've evolved, I'm sure, how they use stakeholders. So I'm really curious about how Tarja is going to maybe present or give you just a snapshot of how they're using or how they continue to use stakeholders. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Tarja Lukkari, and I work as a senior specialist in the Maallikko network of rural liability, housing and integration. And this network is one of the 3 thematic networks of the Finnish Rural Policy Council. This Rural Policy Council is from Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry. But my employer is Kajaani University of Applied Sciences. So today I will talk about our experiences, how we have engaged and involved stakeholders in rural proofing within the Finnish well-being service counties, which are very new organizations. Next slide, please. First, I'd like to briefly introduce the Maallikko network, which focuses on 4 themes that are important for rural Finland. Our themes are rural service structures, village safety, migration and integration in rural areas, and participation and civic engagement. And rural proofing in our work is connected to all of these themes, but I will mostly speak now about rural services and participation level. Our network brings together experts from 4 organizations. You can see them on the slide. And together we support and implement Finland's rural policy program. Next one, please. On this map, you can see some facts about rural areas in Finland and especially the regions of Finland, those black borders. These regions almost match the borders of our well-being service counties. And the green, yellow and brown areas on the map show rural areas. This means that almost every our well-being service county includes large rural areas, not just 1 or 2 counties. And I would like to focus you on this green area. This green area are really sparsely populated areas in Finland. The number of residents in these counties varies a lot, from about 70,000 up to more than 500,000 people. So even though the counties look similar on the map, their population size and the balance between urban and rural areas are very different. This shows that rural conditions are relevant across the whole country and not only in a few remote areas. Next one, please. I will tell you something about our well-being service counties because they are still quite new in Finland. They started their work in January 2023, and so they are still developing their structures, their service structures mainly. So rural proofing is important just now. And we have 21 well-being service counties which now organize our healthcare, social services and rescue services. They do not collect taxes and almost all their funding comes from the state based on service needs, population structure and real costs. They also have elected county councils. And why were these counties created? The main reasons were to give people equal access to services, to improve quality and staff availability, to reduce cost pressures, and to strengthen emergency and crisis preparedness. Next one, please. Many counties are under strict budget pressure because they don't collect taxes, and rural services are usually the first to be reorganized. Services are also becoming more centralized and more digital, which can create real problems for people in rural areas, especially if distances are long and we have long distances and digital skills and connections are limited. Most counties do some kind of impact assessment, but they do not necessarily assess rural impacts. This means rural effects often stay invisible. The challenge is to get counties to use rural proofing regularly as part of their normal process. The ex-ante assessment is mandatory for healthcare services counties. That's why rural proofing is now included in the electronic ex-ante assessment tool, which helps bring the rural viewpoint into everyday decision making. But counties use also different tools. And sometimes the rural perspective disappears or the results are not used when the budgets are tight. Next one, please. Maleco network plays two key roles in rural proofing, and this means those yellow boxes. First, we encourage counties to make the decision to carry out the rural proofing. We do this by raising awareness, explaining why rural proofing matters, and offering ready-made materials that make it easier to begin. Second, we support the rural proofing when needed or if needed. We provide webinars, regional events, brochures, social media materials, and face-to-face discussions. In practice, we help counties understand the steps, choose suitable tools, and ensure the rural perspective is included. Finally, it's important to note the decision to conduct rural proofing depends on key actors: regional council members, county leadership, and senior officers. Their commitment determines whether the rural proofing moves forward. In the participation phase, we work together with different actors. Participation of officers lead the process and make sure everyone can take part. Residents share their everyday experiences and tell us how services really work in their communities. Municipalities bring local knowledge and help connect the work to local needs, and NGOs give us important insights from the people they support. In the other phases of the rural proofing process, we haven't been involved. Those steps were carried out by other actors in well-being services counties. Next one, please. Now I have some real examples about what we are doing. Let me begin by explaining how we have worked with regional council members and officials responsible for participation when promoting rural proofing. Our main goal has been to raise awareness and encourage counties to adopt rural proofing in their decision making. To do this, we contacted all regional council members across the well-being service counties. We provided them a ready-made template for council initiative, making it easy for them to bring the topic to the councils. What we learned is that all political parties had the opportunity to become involved, but usually only one party in each county showed real interest. The other parties often choose not to engage, mainly for political reasons rather than because of the content. We also noticed that politicians in many cases were more curious about rural proofing than civil servants. This was valuable insight for us because it showed that the political leadership can play an important role in opening doors for new approaches like rural proofing. We contacted also participation officers in all well-being services counties and had discussions with almost all of them. Our aim was to integrate rural proofing into counties' existing participation structures. These participation processes already involve residents, service users, municipalities, and many organizations from the third sector. The good news is that many of these conversations were positive. Some counties even expressed readiness to include rural proofing in their participation frameworks. However, the biggest challenge remains the same: how to make sure that the view collected through participation truly influence the final decision. And this is something we really need to continue working on. Next one, please. Now I have two practical examples about rural proofing process, starting with the top-down approach from central Finland. In this case, instead of using the term rural proofing, the county carried out a broader regional impact assessment, meaning that the assessment covered all population groups and all areas. And this name made also it more acceptable. The process made extensive use of research materials as well as experience gathered from other well-being services counties. A large group of social and healthcare experts took part, meeting weekly and contributing to assessment work. Residents, municipalities, NGOs and staff gave feedback through surveys and digital platforms, and during the consultation phase, a significant amount of input came from those directly affected by the changes. The final assessment of the service network proposal focused especially on the themes that appeared during the consultation. It is fair to say that this was a comprehensive and well-organized participatory assessment, and it had positive impacts on the rural service network at that time. Later, however, financial challenges created pressure and eventually led to the consolidation of the service network. This shows how even a strong participatory and well-done rural proofing process can be affected by wider economic realities. The next one, please. My last example is the bottom-up example from the municipality of Rautalampi. This rural proofing workshop was organized together with the Leader Association, the municipality, and our rural policy network. The goal was to involve residents, NGOs, businesses, and policymakers in assessing the positive and negative impacts of the well-being services reform, especially the latest service network proposal. Participants represented municipalities, civil society organizations, businesses, and the well-being services county. The workshop succeeded as a participatory assessment, but it faced challenges because senior county officers and decision makers showed limited interest in the results. This situation led to what later became known as healthcare rebellion in Rautalampi. Residents felt their concerns had been ignored, and they organized the theatrical election panel to highlight real-life service problems and put pressure on decision makers. It became a symbolic example of what can happen when local voices are not fully heard. This case clearly shows the importance of meaningful engagement and taking local perspectives seriously. Next one. On this slide, I explain why involving stakeholders matters. When we listen to different groups, our decisions improve, risks decrease, and trust grows. Stakeholders also bring useful knowledge and new ideas that help us understand the real impacts of our choices. To end my presentation, I will briefly highlight what the examples teach us about working with different actors in the well-being services counties. Each group plays a different role. Regional council members, the politicians, bring political leadership, but political dynamics can limit how widely rural proofing is used. The participation officials see that rural proofing can fit into their current models, but the challenge is making sure their information reaches decision makers. And this top-down process, like Central Finland, are systematic, but results can still be shaped by external pressures. And bottom-up processes like in Rautalampi highlight local voices, but they require decision makers to listen and act. Together, these groups make rural proofing stronger, and they all can take part. The last slide, please. Thank you for listening. We are working ahead, and we are now planning a better rural proofing tool and system for these counties. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. And thank you for a really comprehensive presentation. And you raised the point about something we talked about is no matter you get all the work together, but you can't get the policymaker or the politician to maybe pay as much attention. But at the same time, you also illustrated a good, an interesting point where there were instances where the political actors were more interested than the civil servants, which is something else we've discussed here, which is getting the civil servant to actually rural proof can be sometimes the hardest part, which is who we tag sometimes as our rural proofers. So I hope from the audience you got a comprehensive perspective on stakeholders today. I think please send up an applause for our speakers for taking the time to share different perspectives, different tools that they're using. If you have any burning questions, we have 3 minutes. But I know the chat has been busy, so maybe you've exhausted your questions. But if you have a question and you want to raise your hand, we have 2 minutes so we can ask one.